rapid portion of, well, so it was day 2, Magnus played against Peter Swidler, he went for precisely the same line, so this time he went bishop g4 early and took the knight on f3. Okay, so somewhat more pleasant for white, but very solid position for black and as well unbalanced, right? So, well, not a symmetrical structure. Black has, I mean, white has a pair of bishops. Black tries to prove that this bishop, the light square bishop, is not that important. We'll be looking for a nice place for his knight. Okay, so what's now? Because white is thinking for quite a long time. White is thinking for quite a long time. Some bishop d4 maybe. a4. And Magnus plays queen to a5. So what he wants here, Katie? Queen b4 or?
I don't really know what he wants.
Queen d2, rook goes to e8. Ah, well, rook e8 is the right move. So to be able to answer bishop h6 with bishop h8, right? So that the bishops are not getting exchanged.
Maybe he wants to take on d5, and in some cases he wants to be e3, e7 pawn protected.
b4? What's b4?
If queen b4, yeah, then rook b1. But
and queen a5
go back.
Ah, you mean queen a5 back, and then he would take on b7. Rook a3, protecting the c3 square, and now c takes d5 happens.
Forced to take with e pawn.
Yeah, it has to take with the e pawn, and then knight b6, and this is terribly unpleasant for white because all the squares are big. Or knight e5, which is more or less the same. So knight is heading towards the c4 square. I mean, it's like the backward pawn on c2, and not a lot you can do about it. So already we can say black managed to outplay his opponent. Rook to b3. So that means he does not. Well, I'm not sure, but feeling
he has to give up one of the bishops. After
he has to give up
c4.
one of the bishops, exactly. But I'm just trying to understand which one he is planning to. Because if you take on c4, that means you will never ever be able to get control of a c4 square again. But if you move the queen and black takes on e3, then the dark square bishop seems to be much better than.
But
so
Nick
he takes and
decides
goes
to
bishop
give
d4.
this light square bishop and put another bishop on d4 to control this g7 bishop.
Yeah, so he wouldn't
bishops
mind
in
to
one
exchange the
sentence.
bishops. He keeps c3 protected just in case. There is no knight takes e5, knight takes d5 because, well, bishop h6, what a move. What a move. So attacking the queen, if queen goes away, black is ready to take on d5. If queen takes on h6, black would have taken on d4. So it forced white to go back to e3. Magnus exchanges and goes
Queen
f4. Okay. It also creates some tactical possibilities for white, you know, because queen
Maybe
on
he
f4
wants
is
to
not.
come on bishop rook c4, another rook on c8. What do you think?
Who knows?
No,
Rook
c7.
c7, b5. Okay, white is trying to organize some counterplay of his own.
a5.
b5, a5, and now black needs to bring the knight to c5. Well, rook c5. Rook b5, still knight d7 seems to be a decent move. Bringing the knight over to c5. Yeah, I think, well, it's not that clear in terms of advantage for Magnus, because I thought he is about to get a serious advantage. Well, I don't see it anymore. And actually knight d7 can be answered with knight e4. Well, the feeling is like queen f4 wasn't the best move. Wasn't the best move. He still goes knight d7, now knight e4 is a possibility for his opponent, for Alexander Bortnik.
94, 95.
No, he takes on c5, right? Knight c5, queen b5, attacking the rook as well as a5 pawn.
Queen b4 is possible?
No, the rook is hanging on e8 with
Oh,
a check.
rook is hanging.
So it's like, yeah. So the thing here is that probably play rook a8 anyway.
Yeah, that's the only move.
But then e7 is kind of under attack. Rook e7, then you can give a check
on
take on
c1.
c2. Yeah, it's tricky. I mean, white's pawns are much more advanced, so that means white has more space, but at the same time the pawns might be a bit more vulnerable, you know. Knight to e2. Okay. Yeah, it's very logical thing to do. So to have the knight closer to a king, right? So to avoid perpetuals, and maybe as well this knight can participate in a kingside attack if this ever happens. Queen f5 trying to get to d5 pawn. Oh, well, it's actually a double attack on f2 and d5, right? Queen c4.
Queen
Now
c4.
queen f2 seems to be an option. Knight back to c3. If only black could activate his rook from e8, he would immediately be in a very good shape.
Right.
But it's not so easy. It's not so easy for the time being.
h5, h4?
Yeah,
Or it can be maybe just weakness.
Queen f6, rook back to e2. Now, I'm just thinking what white wants. Probably white wants to swap the knights. Like knight e4, for instance, if this happens. Knight e4 and black takes and white takes with something. Then white definitely has compensation for the pawn, right? So a bit
Knight
more
goes
space.
on
Knight d7. So
d7.
now a new square for this knight will be an e5 square.
And meanwhile, b6 pawn is hanging too.
b6 pawn is hanging, but how about queen c7? Well, I'm actually somewhat worried that white's gonna play queen c7. No, he starts with knight e4 attacking the queen.
Check on f4.
This allows a check on
Also,
f4.
it's a pin.
g3. Chasing the queen away. Queen e5. Still manages
What is
to
this
keep.
move?
Still manages to keep everything.
What is knight
okay.
c5?
Knight c5. I don't know. There was knight c5. Knight takes b6 maybe. Maybe knight takes b6. I don't know. Rook to d8. Well, it's very, very awkward for Magnus. What can I say? Queen takes a5, queen d4. But then, yeah, that's really. And how about f5? f5, knight c3. Yeah, I really don't know what goes on now. They are both left with only seconds on a clock. Magnus is visibly nervous. What can I say? I mean, he's still in control of the time. He's still in control of the time. His opponent has somewhat less time, but Magnus is visibly nervous, and still his rook is, well,
Very passive.
struggles to find an open file. Still struggles to find an open file with his rook, while his opponent seems to play with a serious
Now
amount
double
of
attack on
confidence.
a4 and f7.
Well, it's a very annoying double attack. I'm sure Magnus has blundered this one. I don't even
6
see a move
seconds
for
on the
Roger.
clock.
Rook f8. Now he's
There
a piece
is
down.
knight for 3 pawns.
Yeah, it's 3 pawns, but those pawns, you know, they are not connected pass pawns. So objectively, white's position is much better. Queen e3, queen d4. He might still save this one, but it's a very, very bad position now. King to g7, rook d5, rook to c8. A check on second rank. Yeah, that's good. Checks all the time. No, rook b1. Yeah, keeping the b pawn protected. Then it won't be that easy for white to hide the king now. King goes to f4, back to f3. So, no, I don't believe white wants a draw here. I don't believe white wants a draw here. Knight d4. Okay. Yeah, Magnus managed to save something similar against Hikaru Nakamura in classical chess not that long ago. King g7 just trying to keep it as fortress, right? Rook a4. Yeah, if the b7 pawn is not here, I know the winning method, and maybe it will be demonstrated by Alexander Bortnik. So you take the b7 pawn first of all, which might be not easy to do. And then you are supposed to sacrifice on f7 and win the pawn endgame. King g8, keeping the possibility to play f6 if if the chance will be given.
What he is doing?
Rook d6. He's trying to control the sixth rank, which is very, very logical. A check from here. Rook d7. Now black can put the knight d6 is an option. That's interesting. Because knight e6 would have been really annoying. Rook here, king f8, king to d5. The feeling is like
Can now f6.
no, he can. He could go f6. Yeah, he could go f6, trading the last pawn. He could go f6, trading the last
White
pawn.
is on 4 seconds.
4 seconds
3,
only for white.
5
so
already.
White is bringing the knight to e5, and then it's a check and rook f5, or yeah, checks. Yeah, here it's always gonna be checks, checks. King f4, check again. Knight f3. Now he can. Well, actually, I think you go back to b file. Right, you don't want to move the pawn because then white rook is put on b7 and it attacks both b4 and f7. So black will have
Oh, he was about to
yeah,
take
he
on
couldn't
g5.
take because of this knight e6 trick. Yeah,
We had this position already on
I
the
told
board.
you, his opponent is a very, very tricky player. I still don't feel like Magnus is safe. Check. Knight back to d4. I think it might be already like threefold repetition, but
If Magnus plays bishop, rook b6.
check. King to e5. Check from b5. Now the king has to go back. Knight d4.
Rook b6.
No, I think it was with king on g7. Oh, okay, rook b1. That's something new. That's something new. Check here. King back to f4. Another check. And rook to b1. That's, I'm sure, is a threefold repetition, but white will continue trying. King goes to e4 now. Rook f5. So now black makes sure he exchanges the last pawn because, yeah, now he can play f7, f6. But
B5?
Magnus decides not to because, yeah. But how do you make progress with white in this position if black simply moves his king?
Yeah, king to
King
f7.
f8, g7, g8, whatever. Yeah, it doesn't look to be possible. Yeah, whenever you move the knight, yeah, it is a draw. It's just a draw. Knight d4. Once again, this little trick. Once again, this same little trick with knight e6 check. It was, yeah, it was better to. Yeah, now he lost the b pawn and f6. He goes for f6 because that's the only chance now. Checks. After 2 checks, the king will be cut on the last rank. Still dangerous for Magnus Carlsen, but his opponent is on literally on seconds, so he has to really play very fast. Rook f7. Ah well. Dear me. King h6. Some threats on. He doesn't want to give this g pawn, which is remarkable. Which is remarkable because. Yeah, that's actually the way to get into trouble, I guess. Still trying to protect your pawn because, you know, one day this rook might be knight e6. Knight to e6. g5. Well, no, I think he will end up losing the g pawn and this game will continue. It's already move number 124.